Freddy Krueger, whose name is Samson Dunstan in this film, went alligator hunting with his son. We swam in a restricted area because it was possible to catch a particularly large specimen here. Ainsley whined and moaned all evening, wanting to get home as soon as possible, but Samson was not going to leave without prey. Ainsley then decided to leak straight into the water and almost lost the capsule. His father had to surrender to his son and go ashore so that Ainsley could relieve himself normally. The two had no idea that they had wandered into Victor Crowley's territory and paid for it. Samson left first. Ainsley found his remains not far from the shore. And it was his turn. In the end, both Dunstans became prey without killing either alligator. Meanwhile, college friends Ben and Marcus come to modern Orleans to celebrate Mardi Gras. There are a lot of topless girls here, but Ben is not interested in them. He recently broke up with his girlfriend, whom he had been dating since high school, and he was very sad. Ben wanted to take a break from all this fuss and went to a tour operator to the local swamps. They said that you could see a real ghost there. In order not to leave his friend alone in this state, Marcus follows him. When they visit the man everyone calls Reverend Zombie, it turns out that he no longer gives tours of the swamps. However, the Reverend advises looking for another establishment further down the street. The owner of this store is not so legitimate and will happily take the boys to the swamp. Entering Sean's store, the friends see a producer named Duck Shapiro making an amateur video with two third-rate actresses, Mist and Jenna. They also want to go to the swamp and shoot some impressive nude footage there. Gathering the group on a trip, Sean gets behind the wheel of a bus and hits the road. In addition to the producer and his actresses, as well as Ben and Marcus, on the bus were the elderly Permateo couple and a lonely young lady named Mary Beth. Marcus immediately fell in love with Jenna, and she reciprocated his feelings, but Ben liked the withdrawn and unfriendly Mary Beth. True, he wasn't very good at flirting with her. Cool jacket. Arriving at the swamp, Sean ordered everyone into the pleasure boat and tried to start it. It didn't work right away. Meanwhile, another alligator hunter was nearby. He warned Sean and his group not to swim in the part of the swamp where Victor Crowley lived, but they didn't listen. Looking at Sean's boat, the hunter drank his own urine from a bottle for the health of these people, because an unenviable fate awaited them. As they floated in the darkness, Marcus noticed Jenna furiously scratching at her charm. At this point, the excursion no longer seemed so interesting to him. He expected to crush Jenna, but she was already engulfed in biting parasites. I really don't want to. As the boat passed the barn, Sean said it was Victor Crowley's building. He told a legend about this man. There were rumors that Victor was born so scary that his own father cut his face with an axe. Since then, Vicka began to be called an axe. Despite all the horror stories Sean told, his clients were bored. It was not possible by chance to add some variety to the excursion. The boat ran aground, and it started to rain. Mischief tried to call for help, but there was no cell phone there. At some point, the rain became so heavy that the boat began to sink underwater. Something had to be done urgently. Mr. Permateo offered to go ashore, but the tree he stepped on was slippery, and the old man grunted with his crotch on its trunk. At that moment, an alligator came out of the swamp and grabbed Permateo by the leg. To prevent the old man from being dragged into the water, Mary Beth pulled out a gun and shot the alligator. Permateo was then able to land on shore, and the others followed. It was dangerous to stay in the boat because predators could smell blood in the water. Once everyone had calmed down a bit, they began asking Mary Beth about her gun. It turned out that her last name was Dunstan, and her father was Samson. He and his son went alligator hunting and never returned. Mary Beth believes they were victims of Victor Crowley. She told the true story of this monster man. Victor is born horribly deformed, but his father takes care of him. Victor's deformity is not surprising considering his father is Jason Voorhees. But here everyone knew him as Thomas. When Crowley Jr. was a child, he was bullied by his peers. Thomas tried to hide his son to avoid similar attacks. But one Halloween, the children decided to lure Victor out of the house and threw firecrackers at the porch. A fire started. When Thomas returned home, the portal was on fire. He couldn't open it and didn't think about breaking the window. So Tom took an axe and started cosplaying as Jack Nicholson from The Shining. However, he did not take into account that his son was pressed against the door on the other side, and cutting the board, hit him on the head with an axe. Realizing that after such a blow he would not become a fashion model, Victor died. After some time, Thomas also died, but since then, on the eve of Halloween, Victor's spirit appears in the forest. He calls his father and kills anyone who enters his territory. After listening to this story, Mary Beth's companions began to convince her that the girl's father and brother were still alive and had simply disappeared. But Mary Beth wasn't so sure. He wanted to find them, but now it was difficult to do so. Coming ashore, they found themselves next to Victor Crowley's house, and behind this building there was a highway that could lead them back to the city. Despite Mary Beth's terrible story, the whole party walked through the forest. Mr. Permadio was unwell and had lost a lot of blood and 2 testicles. He had to be rushed to the hospital. Hearing Victor's voice in the night, the young man froze, but the elderly couple continued to walk forward. Crowley met them at the house. He tore the old man to pieces and then chased after his wife. Seeing a large man with a disfigured face, Mary Beth fired several bullets at him. It turns out he wasn't such a ghost after all. He fell to the ground, but was not finished off. Everyone just ran away. Marcus climbed a tree, and Shapiro finally got lost in the forest. He fell into the clutches of Crowley and joyfully killed the full producer. At this time, Marcus decided to look around and see in which direction the city was located. Ben promised to call for help when he reached civilization, but his companion did not want to remain alone in the forest and descended to the ground. On the way, Marcus and Sean began to quarrel. It turned out that the organizer of the excursion knew little about these places, since he had recently moved here. In order not to be punished for illegal business, he took tourists into a closed area. They simply won't be able to catch him there. And this trip became his second tour of the swamps. However, Marcus and Sean were not allowed to fight. Ben found Shapiro's purse. There were documents in his things, and then everyone realized that Doug had a different name and was not a producer. He simply decided to deceive the gullible actresses and make a video for home use. Jenna and Miss Dara were angry with Doug, but he didn't care anymore. Friends found his body further down the trail. They realized that Crowley was still alive. They also found out they were going in circles when they returned to Victor's house and didn't find his body there. Mary Beth suggested that they dig around the monster's house and see if there were any weapons there. Nobody liked the idea, but there were no others, and the rest gave up. While the boys stood guard, Ben and Mary Beth entered the building. The bodies of the girl's father and brother were found here. Ben also noticed fuel cans. Perhaps there is still gasoline left in them, and not everything is smooth on the street either. Marcus found a raccoon in the bushes, after which Crowley snuck up behind him and used an angle grinder to trim Jenna's appearance. After Jenna, Victor took over management of Sean. Having deprived him of one leg, he cut off the man's head with a shovel. Crowley turned out to be a creative person. Deciding that something is missing in this bloody mess, he stabs the still-living Jenna with the handle of a shovel. Thank God, Jenna was in a horizontal position at that moment. Marcus, Ben, Misty, and Mary Beth ran away. At the same time, Ben took a pitchfork with him. When they stopped to catch their breath, Crowley was hiding nearby. He sat on his leg and waited for attention. And as soon as his friends turned, he attacked them. Ben hit him with a pitchfork. And when Victor fell, his friends did not finish him off and simply ran away. Buoyed by his small victory, Ben decides to take revenge on Crowley if he attacks them again. He remembered that there was fuel in the maniac's house and offered to take it and use it against Victor. While rummaging through the monster's belongings, he killed and dismembered Misty. However, friends did not allow themselves to be treated so easily. They attacked Crowley, and Ben managed to douse him with fuel and set him on fire. Victor fell again, but then it started to rain and the flames went out. The guys again did not finish off the maniac and simply ran away. They reached the cemetery. The highway began behind the gate, but the gate was closed, and Victor Crowley followed him. He grabbed Marcus and beat him up. Mary Beth and Ben ran back into the forest. Crowley tore the pond out of the cemetery gates and rushed after it. He threw the lake like a spear and hit Ben in the leg. Mary Beth suggested tilting this armature so that Victor would crash into it. He ran toward his friends, not realizing that they were trying to kill him, and landed on the Iron Lake. Mary Beth and Ben didn't finish their drinks and just left. They found Samson and Ainsley's boat and tried to sail away, but Crowley caught them again. He pulled Mary Beth underwater, where she was clinging to a branch. While she hesitated, fighting for her life, Victor jumped into the boat and tore off Ben's arm. With his hand, he pulled Mary Beth to the surface and gave her a rather loud scream.